They called it heritage. They called it soul. But when this ghost engine hit the pavement, all that noise collapsed. The rules broken, the kings dethroned. Watch till the end, because this isn't about motorcycles anymore. It's about who gets to define power from now on. What's happening? It didn't launch at a showroom. It detonated on a local track and no one was ready. It was a dry afternoon in Nevada, the kind of track day where riders gathered more for camaraderie than for competition. Most were running tuned Harleys, stretched Yamahas, maybe the occasional turbocharged Suzuki, but then a matte black sleeper rolled off a trailer with no badges, no decals, no hint of what it really was. People barely noticed it until it fired up. The sound wasn't loud, it was deep, a frequency that rumbled in your ribs. At first, some assumed it was a bored-out Harley V-twin running race pipes. But when it launched, everything changed. Onlookers froze as the bike exited pit lane and tore down the straight. It didn't wheelie, it didn't wobble, it compressed. Forks sank as torque slammed the machine into the pavement, launching it forward with eerie stability. In less than 10 seconds, the paddock went silent. Seasoned riders muttered comparisons, maybe a custom S&S, a heavily modded V-Rod, but nothing added up. On its second lap, it flew past the stands again, and this time someone timed it. The numbers broke every known threshold for a production-class V-twin. This wasn't just a fast bike, it was a different animal altogether. And when it rolled back into the pit, no one spoke. They didn't have to. They'd just witnessed the end of something sacred. But what no one at the track could see was that the real rebellion hadn't begun on asphalt. It started in a lockdown lab with engineers who had nothing left to lose. Ghost in the machine. This engine wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't even funded. It was revenge. 5 years earlier, deep inside Shinsei Motors, a company known for hybrid sedans and silent electric scooters, a group of mid-level engineers had grown restless. They'd watched the motorcycle world cling to nostalgia while innovation stalled. American giants like Harley-Davidson leaned harder into chrome and heritage, while their own parent company refused to even discuss combustion development. So they stopped asking, and they started building. It began inside a mothballed factory annex, half forgotten during Shinsei's last restructuring. The team dubbed themselves Project Uri, Japanese for Ghost, because no one was supposed to know they existed. Budgets were personal. Dyno runs were done after hours. Engine parts were shipped to private addresses to avoid internal scrutiny. But it wasn't rebellion for its own sake. It was obsession. The Uri team wanted to create an engine that didn't just beat the V-twin, it erased it. They didn't care about branding or exhaust notes. They wanted torquey curves that bent time. They wanted to prove that combustion could still evolve, violently, beautifully, and without legacy constraints. When Shinsei's leadership finally discovered the project, the prototype was already outperforming anything in their official catalog. But instead of killing it, they did something no one expected. They greenlit it, quietly, off the books, with a single mandate: build it right. Once the secret was greenlit, the madness became method, and the rules of engine design were the first to burn. If this already feels bigger than just specs and speed, hit like and drop your take in the comments. Is this the future of riding, or the beginning of a corporate civil war? Your opinion might ignite the next wave. The laws they broke. This engine didn't just outperform, it broke the laws of combustion physics and got away with it. Forget what you know about engine evolution. The Uri power plant didn't iterate. It reinvented. It scrapped the legacy oil-based cooling systems and replaced them with a patented split-phase liquid loop that reduced thermal strain by over 40%. Its combustion chamber was lined with aerospace-grade carbon nanotubes, allowing compression ratios previously thought impossible without pre-ignition detonation. The intake was an active geometry system that adjusted in real time based on RPM load, throttle input, and ambient conditions. The ECU wasn't just mapped, it was neural assisted. It learned, adapted, and evolved based on each rider's style. That meant no two rides ever felt exactly the same, and yet every ride delivered perfect power. Noise wasn't an accident either. The exhaust system was tuned not just for output, but for emotional resonance, hitting subharmonics that registered more in your chest than in your ears. Riders didn't just hear the Uri, they felt it. And here's what shocked regulators. It passed. Euro 5, CARB. It didn't skate by. It crushed every emission standard. No tuners, no trickery, just raw, brilliant engineering. Harley's Screamin' Eagle 135 CI, while loud and proud, couldn't come close to those figures without aftermarket mods and race exemptions. It wasn't a hot rod, it was a scalpel, and the specs weren't even the most devastating part. Yet all the tech in the world wouldn't have landed this hard without the number that finally broke the industry's back: the price tag. Riding with the old rules is optional. Your gear shouldn't be. Check the description for gloves, jackets, and tech we ride with. No noise, no fluff. Just the future, on your terms. Price war casualty. Harley spent decades selling upgrades. This engine erased them in a single invoice. When Shinsei unveiled the Uri crate engine's retail price, the number wasn't whispered. It was detonated. $8,000 for full output, legal, tuned, and ready to drop into a standard mid-frame chassis. For perspective, a Screamin' Eagle 135 CI Stager 4 engine from Harley costs more than $11,000 before installation and still requires additional tuning and exhaust upgrades to reach its full potential. Performance shops were stunned. For decades, they'd built empires by stacking bolt-ons, cams, injectors, big bore kits, high-flow air cleaners. A serious V-twin build often topped $15,000. The Uri, it needed none of it. Just mount and ride, and in every measurable way, torque, throttle response, cooling performance, it left those builds in the dust. Orders began stalling at Harley dealerships. Buyers who had deposits down for road glides and Softails began asking questions. Uncomfortable ones. Why pay triple for less? Why chase tradition when revolution had already arrived? Forums turned hostile. YouTube dyno comparisons exploded. Aftermarket brands like Vance and Heinz, S&S, and Thundermax began slashing prices to stay relevant. But it didn't matter. The tide had shifted. Because this wasn't a product drop. It was a funeral march. Not just for Harley's engine business, but for the entire economy built around maintaining it. And the worst part? Shinsei hadn't even started marketing yet, but someone else had noticed, and they weren't going to stay quiet. Denial protocol. Harley called it a gimmick, until the footage left them no excuses. In the first few weeks after the Uri engine went public, Harley-Davidson's response was textbook legacy damage control. They issued press releases filled with familiar language, heritage, soul, lifestyle. The phrase "real riders" was repeated so often it felt algorithmic. According to Harley's senior spokespeople, the Uri was nothing more than a tech stunt that couldn't survive in the real world. But while they spoke, YouTube rolled. The teardown videos were viral gold. Titles like Uri vs. Harley, Torque Doesn't Lie, and Harley's Nightmare Engine Explained racked up millions of views. High-speed pulls, drag runs, thermal camera tests, all showing the Uri outclassing Harley's Screamin' Eagle by margins that felt impossible. Dyno results scrolled across screens in slow motion. $8,000 for this? One reviewer asked, wide-eyed, as the torquey curve spiked past anything the Milwaukee 8 could deliver. Harley's messaging unraveled fast. Attempts to discredit the engine only fed the algorithm. Comments flooded in from frustrated owners. Why am I still paying for power that other brands are giving away? The brand's image, once armored by loyalty, now looked brittle. And while the public mocked the old guard, the real crisis wasn't online. It was upstairs. Behind the polished press statements, something darker was unraveling. Harley's leadership wasn't united. It was eating itself alive. Boardroom implosion. Inside the executive wing, a war broke out, and no one was on the same page. The first meetings were quiet. Numbers were questioned. Marketing pushed optimism. Finance pointed to slowing deposits. Engineering remained silent, but the mood shifted when leaked Uri data showed up in their inboxes, verified by independent testing labs. The engine was real. The threat was real. And the company had no playbook for this kind of disruption. The schism formed fast. One camp, led by younger execs, wanted to pivot hard, launch a stripped-down performance line, chase innovation, rebuild Harley's brand as a forward-leaning powerhouse. The other camp, older and entrenched, saw that path as betrayal. They argued that chasing Shinsei meant abandoning everything that made Harley Harley. Their answer? Double down on American muscle, ride the wave, pray it passed. What followed was weeks of closed-door meetings, tense calls with regional managers and brand consultants hired in secret. Proposals circulated. A parallel brand under Harley's umbrella, a co-developed engine with a domestic tech firm, even a temporary licensing deal to buy time, but nothing gained traction. Trust had fractured. Morale collapsed on the engineering floor. Designers refused to work on updates they didn't believe in. Sales teams scrambled without direction. Deadlines slipped. And through it all, the Uri kept selling. In that chaos, someone reached for the only weapon they had left: regulation, legal engine block. If Harley couldn't outrun it, they'd try to out-legislate it. The company's legal team didn't see the Uri as a product, they saw it as a loophole. From their perspective, any engine that powerful and that clean had to be skating the edge of something. And if they couldn't beat Shinsei in the market, they'd slow them down in the halls of government. It started with quiet meetings. Harley lobbyists briefed officials at the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Transportation, and 2 trade commissions. Their message was subtle but effective. No direct accusations, just questions. How had the Uri passed emissions so quickly? Were the cold start tests done on U.S. soil? Was the ECU firmware truly locked against future tampering? From there, the narrative evolved. Harley claimed the Uri's compression ratios suggested borderline detonation thresholds. They floated concerns about long-term emissions durability. They requested a re-evaluation of Shinsei's certification paperwork. It wasn't about blocking sales, it was about pausing them. Shinsei, however, had anticipated this. Within days, they released their full compliance documents online. They published emissions lab video logs, calibration data, and even invited regulators to visit their R&D facility. Their lead engineer did interviews in fluent English, calling Harley's campaign a nostalgic delay tactic. The legal gambit failed, but it revealed something Harley hadn't admitted publicly. They were scared. And outside the courtroom, their most loyal allies had started turning. Fan base fracture. The most loyal riders didn't quit Harley. They felt Harley quit them. For years, the V-twin community had been Harley's immune system, always ready to fight off criticism, mock foreign competition, and wave the flag of American muscle with pride. But the Uri changed the battlefield. Suddenly, data replaced nostalgia. Speed replaced sound. Riders who once worshipped torquey curves began asking, "Why are we settling?" Online forums, once echo chambers of loyalty, turned into war zones. Posts with dyno comparisons were flagged as spam. Mods struggled to control the narrative. Longtime users who defended the Uri were banned, only to return under new names with fresh video links. Threads titled "Harley or Has Been" flooded comment sections. At dealerships, salespeople faced questions they weren't trained for. "Can your engine do this?" one rider asked, holding up a smartphone showing Uri's track lap time. The rep stammered something about heritage. The rider walked out. But not all fans defected. A new wave of ultra-loyalists dug in. They wrapped their bikes in flags, posted videos titled "Stay Loud, Stay Free," and dismissed the Uri as corporate sterility. But their anger wasn't persuasive, it was defensive. Because for many, the betrayal wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Harley could have built the future. It just chose not to. And when the culture starts to shift, the industry follows. Aftermarket collapse. The parts business didn't erode, it cratered. Within 2 weeks of Shinsei announcing Uri's engine as a standalone crate unit, orders started falling off a cliff. For nearly 3 decades, performance shops had built their entire business around squeezing more horsepower out of Harley's V-twins. Big bore kits, cams, exhaust systems, custom ECUs, it was a cottage industry turned empire. But when riders realized they could get more power, more efficiency, and more reliability in a single plug-and-play engine, legal in all 50 states, for under $8,000, they didn't hesitate. Shops reported cancellations at record levels. A distributor based in Phoenix said their orders for Stage 4 Screamin' Eagle kits dropped by more than 70% within the first month. Tuners panicked. Dyno shops that once had weeks-long waiting lists now had open bays by noon. Forums once filled with upgrade guides became ghost towns, overrun instead with tear-down photos of the Uri. It wasn't just performance that collapsed, it was belief. Belief that the upgrade path was worth it. Belief that you needed to wrench your way to speed. With one engine, Shinsei broke the cycle. And the aftermarket economy, long protected by Harley's dominance, was exposed as fragile. But even as the U.S. industry scrambled to recalibrate, another storm was quietly forming. And this time, it wasn't economic. It was informational. Blueprint leak. 3 months after launch, the blueprints were everywhere, and no one could stop it. The leak wasn't dramatic. No whistleblower video, no press conference, just a quiet upload on an encrypted forum used by performance engineers and industrial hackers. At first, it looked like a hoax, a set of CAD files with no documentation and confusing annotations. But within 48 hours, people realized what they were looking at. It was the Uray's internal architecture, complete, annotated, reverse engineerable. No one knows exactly who leaked it. Some say it was a fired supplier. Others believe it came from a firmware dump gone wrong. One theory claims it was intentional, a chaotic good act by someone inside Shinsei. Regardless, the files spread like wildfire. Telegram groups were flooded, Reddit threads exploded, VPN traffic spiked as users across Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe began downloading the leak and testing their own variations. By the end of the week, 3 startups, 2 in Europe, 1 in California, claimed to have working prototypes. None were perfect, all were close, and more disturbingly, none of them had to spend years in R&D. Shinsei's hard work had been cloned for free. The company tried to respond, takedowns were issued, legal action filed, but the damage was done. But even as clones emerged from the shadows, a different kind of resistance was forming. In the chambers of lawmakers and the hands of regulators. The policy reversal. Uray passed every regulation, but lawmakers still wanted it gone. At first, the engine was hailed as a miracle. Clean emissions, low noise, no defeat devices. It ticked every bureaucratic box, on paper, but in reality it violated something less formal and more powerful. Narrative. The global push for electrification had taken years of careful framing. Combustion was being phased out for the sake of climate, regulation, and identity. And suddenly, one engine shattered that consensus. In Brussels, lawmakers questioned whether the Uray was a regression disguised as progress. In Berlin, environmental NGOs called it a dangerous distraction that risked reigniting love for gas engines. And in California, the Air Resources Board requested not 1, but 2 follow-up inspections, despite the engine already being certified. They weren't looking for violations. They were looking for delay. If Shinsei couldn't be discredited technically, then maybe it could be slowed politically. But Shinsei didn't flinch. Their engineers published open letters. Their CEO gave interviews emphasizing life cycle emissions and resource sustainability. They even promised a hybrid variant, though few believed it would matter. The debate had shifted from what was legal to what was allowed to be popular. Uray wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol of combustion's last stand. And while lawmakers debated ideologies, Harley's factories felt something much more immediate: silence. Union uprising. The machines kept running. The confidence didn't. Inside Harley's domestic plants, the mood turned from confusion to dread. Workers on the assembly line, many with 20 or 30 years at the company, began asking questions no manager could answer. Would the Uray cost them their jobs? Would Harley offshore its next platform? Would there even be a next platform? Union leaders held emergency meetings. Some demanded transparency from the executive suite. Others called for a work slowdown. A few even floated the idea of organizing around innovation, not tradition, suggesting that if Harley refused to evolve, the union should start pushing for collaboration with third-party tech partners. That idea alone caused 3 resignations at the local level. Morale was collapsing. Workers whispered between shifts about hiring freezes and tooling delays. Paint crews were suddenly idle. Material orders dropped without warning. The company claimed it was just strategic inventory alignment, but no one believed it. Tensions reached a boiling point when a regional plant in Pennsylvania received notice that 2 upcoming models were under review indefinitely. Translated, they were being shelved. That's when the picket signs started showing up. Not against wages, not against benefits, against direction, against denial. Harley's workforce had stayed loyal longer than anyone, but loyalty has limits. And the silence from upstairs? It was becoming betrayal. The market votes. When the sales data dropped, even Harley insiders stopped pretending. The numbers were merciless. In the first fiscal quarter after Uri's launch, Harley's core model sales fell by 17%. The Softail line, once a symbol of cruiser dominance, was hemorrhaging market share to mid-weight imports and Street Fighter hybrids. But the most damning figure wasn't about units sold, it was demographic. For the first time in company history, the average age of a Harley buyer climbed above 58. Meanwhile, Shinsei's numbers exploded. Uri-equipped bikes sold out across every region within weeks. Waitlists formed in cities from Berlin to Boston, and the riders placing deposits weren't grizzled veterans. They were new. Many were under 30. Many had never owned a bike before. Market analysts flagged a tectonic shift. This wasn't just brand preference. This was generational migration. Harley's discounts and bundled financing failed to stop the bleeding. Even dealers began quietly diversifying their inventory, accepting Uri-equipped trade-ins while still flying the Bar and Shield flag. The market had spoken with brutal clarity. It wanted torque, not tradition. And while Harley rebranded nostalgia as timeless, Uri sold the future, fast, affordable, and undeniable. As the sales charts made one thing undeniable, Harley's defenders turned to a weapon more familiar than innovation: political pressure. Trade war sparks. When America couldn't win in the market, it tried tariffs instead. The backlash began with whispers inside the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Then came the lobbying push. Trade groups tied to legacy manufacturers demanded action. They argued Shinsei's pricing reflected unfair advantages, offshore production, government grants, and regulatory blind spots. Within weeks, senators from Wisconsin and Michigan called for retaliatory tariffs. One declared, "We don't just build motorcycles, we defend American industry." A proposal hit Congress: increase import taxes on Shinsei engines and related components by 25%. But internationally, the move backfired. Germany called the proposal thinly veiled protectionism. Japan, Shinsei's home base, condemned the move as political theater in response to market disruption. Brazil, a rapidly growing motorcycle hub, joined in, warning of countermeasures if the tariffs advanced. What followed wasn't a trade war, but a cold one. Shinsei delayed shipments to several U.S. ports, citing logistical reevaluation. At the same time, European and Asian markets responded by fast-tracking Shinsei dealership certifications, welcoming the disruptor with open arms. Inside D.C., trade economists warned that protectionist measures might backfire. Shinsei had followed every rule. Targeting them wouldn't just hurt diplomatic ties, it would alienate younger riders who now saw the brand as a symbol of unfiltered progress. While lawmakers drew lines on paper, riders were crossing borders of identity, loyalty, and belief without hesitation. The culture migration. Riders didn't just switch brands, they switched belief systems. Across Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit, something was changing. The rebellion that once belonged to Harley was now wearing different leathers. Gen Z riders, many of whom had dismissed combustion as outdated, found themselves lining up to test Uri-equipped bikes. Why? Because it wasn't just fast, it was fearless. Pop-up ride-outs began forming in major cities. Not sponsored, not branded, just organized by word of mouth and location tags. From Oakland to Osaka, new riders were calling themselves The Shift. They weren't riding to honor heritage, they were riding to outrun it. One 24-year-old rider in Chicago posted, "My dad rides a Harley. I ride what's next." That video hit 2 million views in 3 days. Forums splintered. Facebook groups that once glorified chrome and flag-draped tanks now hosted heated debates about relevance. Some Harley loyalists doubled down, clinging to words like soul and authenticity, but others saw through it. They weren't abandoning riding, they were redefining it. And that redefinition was dangerous, because once culture shifts, it rarely comes back. Harley had once symbolized rebellion. Now, to a new generation, it symbolized denial. Beneath the roar of a cultural uprising, the silence inside Harley's walls revealed something far more fragile than market share: legacy on the edge of collapse. If the ground feels like it's shifting beneath legacy brands, it is. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because what comes after this engine won't just change bikes, it's going to redefine identity, power, and who controls the road. Final turn of the throttle. The engine still ran, but the brand? It was gasping for breath. In Harley's downtown headquarters, the marble halls felt more like a museum than a command center. The latest CVO Road Glide glimmered beneath spotlights, polished to perfection, but untouched. Sales reports piled up on desks. Board meetings ran long and ended tense. The leadership team, once defiant, now spoke in softer tones. Strategy meetings turned into soul searches. Then came the internal directive: reinvent or retreat. A task force was formed. Engineers under 40, brand outsiders, cultural analysts. Their mission wasn't to save Harley, it was to reboot it. No more half measures, no more chrome distractions. If the company wanted to exist in 2030, it couldn't just update. It had to transform. Concept sketches appeared. Lightweight chassis, hybrid prototypes, even a rumored collaboration with a Scandinavian EV firm. But insiders said the biggest change wasn't technical, it was emotional. Harley would need to kill its own myth to survive. That meant letting go of the baritone growl, the 60-degree V-twin theology, the made-in-America purity that had once been its shield and sword. It meant stepping into a future that didn't care how loud you were. It cared how fast you could adapt. Because the Uri didn't just challenge Harley, it changed what motorcycles meant. And now, the company that once owned the road faced the hardest ride of all, the one into tomorrow. This wasn't just an engine launch, it was a warning shot, a challenge to every legacy brand still coasting on reputation. If you care about innovation over nostalgia, power over marketing, and the riders rewriting the rules, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, because the next wave isn't waiting. It's already here. Drop your take in the comments, fuel the debate, and make sure you're not watching history repeat. You're shaping what comes next.